At WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and WNST.net. Baseball season doesn't just bring back memories of my dad and putting pictures up and taking over Facebook with baseball messages. It gives me a chance to wear my Geddy Lee Major League Baseball shirt as well, as have on my old baseball nerd buddies who have moved on to do grown-up stuff like leukemia books and stuff like that. Tim Wendel and I we both had media passes back in the 90s when he was covering baseball for USA Baseball Weekly, as well as other publications. He's written several books, and he is a writer-in-residence at Johns Hopkins, and when he retires, I plan on taking over that role. Here's Tim Wendel. You can find him at Tim_Wendel, and watching baseball but trying to solve the world's ills, and has a book on leukemia, which is near and dear to my heart, raising a bunch of dough for LLS as well. But I know it's baseball season, and your little body clock's ticking like mine, Tim Wendel.
Very much, very much. This is the time of year, Nestor. I wish there are two times I miss during the baseball season. One's right now.
Spring training.
Yeah, go to spring training, get warmed up, especially when the weather's been terrible.
I am headed to Arizona next weekend for spring training, which I prefer. But the problem is they're like packing up. Like opening day is the 28th of March. So like even going to Arizona in March does not guarantee you spring training anymore. It's crazy.
Yeah, very much. I think the season's still starting way too early. We got to figure out something around that. But have fun in Arizona. I love Arizona. It's so many games on the same day, and you're bringing back great memories.
By the way, I tell people that all the time, that the best kept secret in a place like Baltimore or Philadelphia or Boston, New York, all these places where no one ever goes to Arizona, and that you spend all of your time seeing alligators and traffic and Clearwater and Dunedin and too many people and all that stuff. Arizona is like literally this gem of an incredible thing to do in March. I tell people all the time, I've got friends that are big Orioles fans, like, I go to Sarasota, and I'm like, oh my God, like you have no idea how much more fun it is to go to Arizona. Well, I only like the Orioles, so I don't really care about, well, go see Manny Machado, go to see the Dodgers in the White Sox park, go see the incredible Cubs facility in Sloan Park. And Arizona, unlike Florida, which mortgaged itself in places like Haines City for Baseball City and Dodger Town, and Vero Beach, which is now pretty much gone, that in Arizona, it's more like town to town. Like, it would be like Towson having a team, White Marsh having a team, Dundalk. It's literally 15 minutes. It's such a better experience, and it never rains.
That's right. It very, very rarely rains. But I totally agree with you. The proximity, and especially when they get doing afternoon games and night games, you can see several games in a day. And some great restaurants. And this isn't taking anything away from Florida. I've had some great times down in Florida. But when we were starting on Baseball Weekly way back in the 90s, and I ended up out in Arizona a lot more, and I went, oh, I like this.
Yeah.
So it's a good time.
Well, you know who else is going to like it for the next 6 months or so? Adam Jones. So I guess there's a perfect segue, as well as Terrell Suggs, who signed with the Arizona Cardinals. So, I'm not the only one going to Arizona next week. Apparently everybody else is as well. This whole offseason, and I want to give everyone your background because I think it's unfair to the audience to not know where you came from and how you got involved in this. But you covered baseball as a birthright and a civic duty 24 hours a day for a long, long time. You're doing other things with your life and exploring leukemia journeys, and we'll get to all that stuff. But back in the 80s when Marvin Miller and War and Donald Fear and Strikes and the Battle Drums, and my dad canceled the Sporting News in 1981 because he was pissed at baseball. I had to find a Tony Robbins firewalk in the summer of 94 to put my life on a better path because baseball shut down in a baseball-only city where we had just lost expansion and we were never going to have this purple football team here. So, my life's taken a lot of turns, but my life's moved so many times on baseball and labor, and I think I've read Lords of the Realm 3 times. Tim, this is a really interesting time because these owners are making so much money. Most people aren't on to how much money John and Lou Angelos roll out of bed with every single day, that it really is an annuity with these TV deals. And they are now going to do anything possible to not give any of it back to the players. And the players are kind of on to this, right?
Very much. I'm beginning to hear the same It's interesting you bring that up, Nestor, because I'm beginning to hear the same drum beats. I covered the labor debacle in '94 and the build up to it, when we started Baseball Weekly in 1991. And again, I'm not covering it as a beat. I'm not on the ground as much as I used to be, but I'm hearing the same type of things. And I believe it was Josh Riddick a couple of days ago saying, in a sense, talking about the Machado, how slow a deal came around. Certainly the Bryce Harper situation, how the money seems to be drying up, as you say, as the owners are making more and more. And Josh Riddick said something effective, well, I guess we've got to start looking ahead and taking a stand in 2021. And that's, in a sense, when the next labor deal kind of hits the skids and it needs to be negotiated. And I'm going, uh-oh, I've heard that kind of thing before. And unless somebody heads it off at the pass, and I don't see that necessarily happening, we could be right back in the soup as we were in 1994 when everybody was having such a tough time and the World Series was canceled.
Tim, revisionist history on this, but as you covered that, it was so full of acrimony and animosity. Going back to Curt Flood, there was race involved, and Frank Robinson dying, and these people putting his number on the wall when Frank had nothing to do with them for a quarter of a century, the last quarter of a century of his life. And going through it, and let me run it backward for you because maybe this will be a fun story for you because maybe you saw some of the pictures because we're LinkedIn friends and Facebook friends and whatnot. I shared a picture of my cousin and myself with Milton Berle from the 1966 World Series. Luis took a picture, clearly at Dodger Stadium, with Milton Berle with a cigar when Milton Berle was the biggest star in the world. I took a picture with Milton Berle at the 1998 World Series at Jack Murphy Stadium underneath. He had come down to see the Yankees play because he was a Yankees fan and Tony Gwynn and all that stuff. And the reason I found that picture was because when Frank Robinson died, I realized I only had like 2 pictures with Frank Robinson. You might have been in that one. Did you play in the 1992 Media All-Star Game at Camden Yards, print versus broadcast?
Unfortunately, I did not make that game.
I have a picture, and I thought one of the dudes might have been you. It might have been Keith Beck. Because I wasn't sure because you guys were similar looking, but I mean, that's just 27 years ago. So I found that picture with Frank, and I thought, do I have any? Frank was not a guy that would pose for a picture with me or kid around with me, he just, he just wasn't. I sort of revered him because my dad was there and my mom on Mother's Day when he hit the ball out of the ballpark on 33rd Street. So, but he played with my cousin, and I did a little research. I'm like, well, maybe there's pictures of Luis and Frank. I mean, they played together for a couple of years. I Googled the picture. I couldn't find a picture of Frank and Louis together. Not, in any sort of pose or APP, nothing, right? So I thought to myself, but I found this Aparicio Burl picture. But what I found on the Aparicio journey was what a malcontent my cousin was in Chicago. And that's how he got thrown out of Chicago. Bill Veeck got tired of him. He was an uppity Venezuelan. He wanted another $500 a year, $1,000, whatever it was. And the punishment in those days was to, if Trump wants to build walls, the wall they would build is, we'll send you off to Baltimore. They stink. Go be Hoffberger's problem. Or go be somebody else's problem. Frank Robinson, I always thought it was about race and I'm sure it was in Cincinnati, but it was because he wanted a raise. And I remember Lords of the Realm, Steve Carlton couldn't get along with Augie Bush because he wanted a raise. So, part of being allergic to ownership in the 60s was asking for a raise, right? And the reserve clause and all that went into that, and I did my own research even 3-4 weeks ago over Frank Robinson to learn how I was born in Baltimore. The reason I'm in Baltimore is because my cousin couldn't get along with the White Sox, literally, and it was labor related. And it wasn't because he couldn't play baseball. The modern era and in your era of covering baseball, I would think in the 80s when they were giving contracts to Matt Young and whatever the speculative things that were stupid in that era, Alex Fernandez with the Marlins and the money that never saw its way, I always really did believe, even though I read Lords of the Realm, that those owners really were taking a risk. Not if they were really wealthy and not Eli Jacobs going broke, but I'm talking about like upside down on the franchise, that signing a specific player would help you sell tickets that would make the player worth that money. We're so far gone from that era of whether Manny Machado is going to help him sell tickets or Bryce Harper, because the money, they're guaranteed profit waking up. And I don't know that you and I ever covered baseball in that era where that was really true outside of the Yankees and the Dodgers, right?
Very much, very much. And I think in a lot of ways what we've lost, too, is, you ticked off on a couple of them there. I mean, with Frank Robinson and, even some of the owners, even Bill Beck, et cetera, we've lost. I mean, this is going to happen because time goes by. We've lost kind of the people that can kind of pull either side away and say, ooh, hang on a minute. To kind of tell a cautionary tale. I even I was looking the other day at some of the folks now involved, say, with the Players Union. And I remember, Don Fear and all that group in 1994 and early 90s, et cetera. They're not there anymore. And I think this is how you end up repeating mistakes, is it's not so much the lessons of the past are forgotten, the people that can clue in a new generation or a new crowd, whether it's ownership or the Players Union.
But you have to have the belly to fight. I mean, some of those guys were real. Mark Belanger, God rest his soul, was a real SOB. And he was a real SOB because he came into baseball at the time when Curt Flood was happening, when he was replacing Aparicio because Aparicio apparently got uppity here again. And they decided to deal him off to Chicago again. And maybe they'd want him back and he would help Mr. Vex sell some tickets out there in the late 60s, right? So, I'm 50 years old, Tim, and I've spent a lot of time in clubhouses, a lot of time around Mike Messina and Tom Glavine back in the day, and Curt Schilling, and everyone who was all a part of the union. And I reconnected with Jim Poole recently, who was the player rep. He was down in Atlanta, the Super Bowl. So I feel like I've covered this as an adult a long time, and Tim, I'm 50 and I'm still learning things. You know what I mean? Literally, I'm still learning things, and I can't imagine, and I don't want to call Manny Machado a mental midget about this or whatever, but he's got to have the belly to say, with $38 million on the table, that I'm going to walk off the job on some July 24th to stick it to the man when he's making $38 million. There's a whole different thing going on than the era of Steve Garvey and Dave Winfield, man,
Very much. And the thing is, the way you break a union, as you well know, is you have the haves and the have-nots kind of split. And you look at some of the money, the way it's still going, certainly for the haves, even with Machado and Harper. It's a long distance from that, maybe down to the lower level guy, the 24th, 25th guy in a roster. The other thing that's got me, I've been kind of reading the tea leaves on this a little bit too, from a Washington Nationals side. And one of the guys who was the most outspoken about the Harper situation, especially in the last couple of weeks before he signed with the Phillies, was Max Scherzer. And I was going, that's interesting. Scherzer's now involved, as the player rep or one of the player reps for the Nationals. This is where things start to take off as you start to read the tea leaves. Okay, who are the player reps and who's kind of moved into that? And how public are they going? And Scherzer certainly was public in his criticism of what he saw was a lack of progress on the contract front for Harper.
Well, then they think they're going to push Tony Clark around, and they're going to have to find out. I mean, I don't know, right? And certainly on the NFL side, Tim, and honestly, over the last 20 years, I've covered the NFL a whole lot more. The NFL's unrest and, the NFL salary cap, which is, leveled the Ravens this week with C.J. Mosley and Weddle. And, I mean, the Ravens are about to undergo a rebuild here or a transition. I mean, clearly, wherever the Orioles are, Tim, I won't be calling you to talk about the Orioles for the next couple of years. I mean, every time I call you, we're going to be at 50,000 feet because, we're not here to talk about Delmarva or Frederick. I mean, the baseball team that they are going to deliver in my market is dog food. I mean, it's absolute dog food, and they're going to charge major league prices, and they're going to roll out bobbleheads, and they couldn't even roll out $3 million for Adam Jones to at least stick him on the side of the wall and give him 550 at bats this year and give somebody a reason to come to the ballpark. I mean, you work at Johns Hopkins, you don't live in the market, but you're in a market where Bryce Harper just disappeared. All of this massing money. Mr. Angelo sat with me 21 years ago and said, when this network happens, we're going to become the Yankees in the Mets. You'll see baseball. But all of this stuff, and, here we are 12 years later. The only thing that's happened is he's eating pudding. His heirs are getting billions of dollars. The city's empty. The city's on fire for leadership. There is no leadership here. I mean, William Donald Schaefer getting that stadium built, man, I just watched the hour-long MPT special on that and the politics that went into that. Can you imagine how the gravitas, right? The testicular fortitude that Mayor and then Governor Schaefer put forth to make baseball stay, to woo football in, and to see what it's become, which is just a cash cow for Steve Bisciotti and Peter Angelo at this point. No, they're making a lot of money. Some players are making a lot of money. But by and large, man, I don't feel the industry of the economy, of the commerce of the city is better in any way because the Baltimore Orioles exist in our city in 2019. And I would have made such a passionate argument about that in 1989, as would you have. And you saw it transform our city, Tim. You were a guy that went from 33rd Street to downtown.
Very much. And then the building of Camden is still, I think, one of the marvels of recent, baseball history. Just in, as you well know, just the wave of stadiums that got going with Janet Marie Smith as the lead architect, et cetera, et cetera. Well, where I'm a little skeptical, and I'm a little, I don't know, I'm usually an optimistic guy, but I'm wondering, the Orioles teardown. We everything seems to be now, you hit a certain point, you get rid of everybody. You get rid of the Adam Joneses, et
And by the way, the fans accept this as, that's just what we got to do. It's like playing a game with no fans. Like how they got away with that and ever had anyone come back to the ballpark.
Well,
when tanks were circling the stadium, it's disgraceful.
It worked like in Cleveland, et cetera, et cetera. What keeps sticking in my mind, Nestor, is at some point it's not going to work. And then what do you do? And that's going to be real interesting. Well, we got the guy from the Astros in, very great pedigree. I mean, the Astros are certainly an amazing turnaround and such, but as you well know, it doesn't work. The best game plan doesn't work 100% all the time. And so that's one of my, when you bring up the Orioles specifically, I'm going, I hope it works again, because I'm not sure where this goes if this doesn't work.
Have you read Astro Ball?
Yeah, I've read parts of it. I think it's very good. But again, that's the blueprint. That's the template that's now being followed. And a part of me is skeptical a little bit, Nestor, that we've got to have a total teardown of a team and start from, like you say, lower than low, where pretty much you're going to have guys taking the field here in a couple of weeks at Camden Yards who arguably should be somewhere in the minor leagues. And as you say, they're going to be charging major league prices to watch these cats. And that's where I kind of go, it seems like there's got to be a little bit better way, because the one who suffers is a longtime Oriole fan. I was down, I was just cruising through, I live down in Virginia, but, I saw a guy the other day wearing an Orioles cap. And I used to be, I go, hey, great. I even go, shout out to him sometimes when I see people like that. I didn't say anything this time, and if anything, I felt kind of apprehensive on his behalf. And that's a weird feeling to have, especially this time of the year, because this is the time of the year everybody's supposed to be in the running, right? But we already know half the teams aren't.
Tim Wendel is our guest. He is an author. He is a baseball historian. He's a good man doing good work on behalf of leukemia. Tim, tell everybody what you're doing as the writer-in-residence at Johns Hopkins. I mean, you used to write about Castro's curveball and Summer '68 and all that kind of stuff, but you've done Cancer Crossings. Obviously, you know where my wife's been on the leukemia journey. I know about your brother and your leukemia journey, but inform everyone about what you're doing here this year, other than just maybe watching baseball not called Orioles.
I still watch the Orioles too, but things are really. The Leukemia and Lymphoma Society reached out to me about 6 months ago, Nestor, and this was on the heels of Cancer Crossings coming out, which is about my brother and the first wave of cancer docs who took the survival rate for childhood leukemia from 10%, which was in the mid-60s, to 90%. And they reached out to me, and this is how interesting the world changes. Not that long ago, as you well know, a lot of the grant money came from, the federal government, state government. Now a lot of the clinical trials are being started up by the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society. And I got together with them out in L.A. about 3 months ago, their big chapter out there. And I said, what do you guys want to talk? Why are you guys bringing me in? What do you want to talk about? And they're there, and they said, we have started up now 5 clinical trials, which LLS is paying for to the tune of 20 to 30 million just this year. And their end goal is to take childhood leukemia from the 90% survival rate, where it's pretty much been since the doctors who treated my brother, kind of ended their journey back in, say, the late 70s, early 80s. And they want to take it to 100%. They're calling it the Children's Initiative, and I think we're going to start hearing much more about it. And as soon as I heard that, I said, count me in. Whatever you need, I am there. And I'm now doing more speaking engagements for them. Just did one up, a big gala up in Buffalo, New York, which raised a ton of money, which is where a lot of these docs got their start at Roswell Park. Been speaking a couple times over at Johns Hopkins, obviously the medical campus. And I think this is just so cool that, something that's been kind of stuck out there at 90%, very much a success story. This is one of the medical marvels of recent medical history. But then to have folks kind of go, well, hang on, why is it still at 90? Why don't we take it to 100? And I think that's a really, really great initiative, and I'm just honored to be involved in it in a peripheral way.
Tim Wendel is here. You can follow his journey on Twitter at Tim_Wendel. Also, the Cancer Crossings, all the things, all the books up there. You can find him as well as on LinkedIn and at Johns Hopkins from time to time, lecturing up here as well as talking. Amazing for a baseball guy to be doing all this leukemia work, right? Like, I guess all of us in our 30s thought this is our life's work, baseball, and then the next thing comes along. And for me, it's Baltimore Positive and what I'm working on. But on the baseball side of things, for the Orioles and for where they are right now, I'd love to get your 100,000-foot take on John Angelos and Lou Angelos showing up for this Orange Lounge press conference thing where guys like me are banned from asking questions. And when the softballs come in like, hey, are you guys going to be more involved now and more available to answer questions for the media and sort of stuff? And there's dead silence, and they look at each other, and they laugh, and then John says, well, I guess not. And then, no, wait, of course, for you, Tim, we'll answer your questions, of course. Not, it really is amazing the arrogance that always sort of steamed out of baseball that you and I would see in various clubhouses with jocks or front office people or whatever. There's an air of arrogance about it, and watching it at 50 and watching kids not wanting to play it, lacrosse here, the owners here clearly not getting it. I mean, I thought the two new kids were going to come in like the Blackhawks kids did, right? And just sort of like work really hard, and even if they screw up, they're going to be out in front of it, and they're going to be working to repair and bringing country concerts, doing all the stuff that they like to do. No. They're going to cut a Billy Joel commercial, and they're going to go run, off to bet on the horses, and they're going to swoop in when something good happens and be unavailable when bad things. I mean, it's very clear to me who these kids are going to be at this point, and I'm only 6 months into this, because if they were going to turn the page and have a new day, they would have had their tickets on sale at Christmas. They didn't. It's so clearly mismanaged when you're here. It's, to your point, a little embarrassing, but I don't know how they get out from under this. And I know no one's going to come for the next couple of years. They're not going to have a product, and the lease is up in 3 years. And I was in Atlanta for 10 days at the Super Bowl, and I saw what they did. They just moved the team, literally moved the team. We're in for a rough patch here, I think, over the next 5 years. And when I try to tell that to people in Essex and Dundalk and Middle River, they don't want to believe it. They just, hey, Orioles ain't never going nowhere. What are you talking about? Well, when you see 5,200 people at the ballpark all this summer and all next summer and all the summer, and like all that, and then they're going to say, well, the lease is up, and what do you want, and what do you want, and what are we going to get? And I've been through this. I went through this looking at my dad's pictures and revisiting the Colts leaving Baltimore. Camden Yards is new and fresh and shiny to guys like you and me. It ain't new and fresh and shiny, and neither's Baltimore right now. And that's one of the reasons I'm getting involved in Baltimore Positive, because I would hate a future here without the Orioles. But I would also hate a future here with the teams in last place for the next 15 years and drawing 5,800 people. And by the way, coming to politicians and saying we want more money.
Yeah, and that tends to be the way it kind of rolls out. And it's funny because, you just touched on something that I think is absolutely right. There's a lot of arrogance, a lot of bluster in baseball. But then when I think back to the franchises and the people that I've had, that have been really successful. I was on the Veterans Committee a couple of years ago, Hall of Fame. We didn't elect anybody in, but it was really pretty cool to hang with, say, Pat Gillick and Bobby Cox and Tony La Russa and guys like that.
They're integrity guys. All those guys are integrity guys, and they're the ones that don't want Barry Bonds in the Hall of Fame, right?
Yeah. Well, I think at some point Bonds will probably make it in, make Clemens too. But the thing is, the successful ones aren't that arrogant. And if anything, they find a way through. And so when, the arrogance meter is like through the roof, I tend to get very skeptical about what's going to shake out. And, I had heard everything you'd been talking about, say, with the Angelo sons and such, but, ouch, that kind of, that kind of sets a bad barometer for where things are going.
Well, I think someone needs to own it and sell it and be it here. And if you're not going to give Manny Machado the money and put him on the wall, and you're not going to give Adam Jones the money and put him on the wall, you're not going to give anybody the money. And the mass and money thing, 15 years later, what a mess, right? Like, literally, what a mess. And it probably, to some degree, costs the Nationals Bryce Harper, right? Because of the uncertainty of that money and the uncertainty of the network and the uncertainty of the future, that we've now seen the two best players in baseball go from our markets and their TV network that we've funded to go play for the Padres and the Phillies now. We've now witnessed that this television network that was supposed to make these franchises special, and this was going to be the cradle of baseball, Tim, let me tell you. We got Cal Ripken here. We're going to honor Frank Robin. Now they're bringing Eddie Murray and Brooks back and giving them $25,000 and having them, prop up for a couple of handful of events. It's just bizarre to me how incredibly mismanaged it's been. But at 100,000 feet, we talked about baseball's problems with labor. Now we've talked about Oriole problems and city problems. I really do look at the crystal ball and say, where are we going here the next 5 years? Because I know we're not going to do. We're not going to have pennant race baseball in Baltimore. So what then becomes of it? Who's going to lead? Who's going to sell tickets? Who's going to sell the sport? And, as a guy that's dedicated my life to it here in Baltimore, I'm gravely concerned about the Orioles.
Yeah, and I think you've got a great reason to be. I can still remember when the attendance started to go down, I don't know, 5-7 years ago, whatever. I kind of lose track. But it was amazing to sit in the visiting dugout, and the new team would, who's ever coming in for the next 3 or 4 games would come in, and I love that part. You get there early, who knows who you can chat with, etc. But to see the looks on the experienced players from the visiting team, and they would just kind of come in, and even after games and such, and already they knew attendance was down, but I forgot who it was. Somebody just telling me, I hear they're only drawing, like 10,000 tonight or something like that. And he'd been here been to Baltimore many times, and he's just looking around the stadium, and it hasn't filled up yet. It's barely going to fill up for the game. And I still remember what he said. He said, I can't quite imagine it. This is such a fun place to play. And I think in a lot of ways that's, I guess it's great you can show up anytime and get a great seat and such, but as you say, sitting with 5,200 in Camden Yards, ouch. I have a tough time wrapping my mind around that too, because I remember not just the heyday with the teams, but how much everybody seemed to enjoy just playing in that place. Home team, visiting team, the fans coming in, etc. And, like you, I covered all the battles and what had to be done, the herding of the cats, the political favors, etc., to get that place built. And now to see it draw, half-filled nights is just it's tragic.
It hurts me more, Tim, because I just went through the Colts thing again for a movie, and I did an hour and a half of riffing on what happened with the Colts, and everything you just said, like if you just take the last 90 seconds of your soliloquy there and took the baseball references out, you're talking about how the football team left here, which is, used to be such a great place, and everybody came, and they stopped coming, and the team wasn't any good, and the owners kind of abandoned abandoned or you hated the media and hated the fans and couldn't get along with the sponsors and couldn't get along with people. And then the fans stopped coming, and then it was the fans' fault for not coming. And then you vilify the fans and say, nobody wanted me anyway, bring in the Mayflowers, let's go. And we're at that point where if a baseball team left here in 2023, you know what they would say? Well, the city's, the city's got too many problems. It's got too much crime. It's, the white flight, the economy, the urban blight, all that is going to go on when they try to take the team out and say, well, nobody's going to the game. Nobody wants to come downtown anymore. And that's going to be the built-in excuse when 5,800 people come and they move the team to Nashville.
And the thing is, as you well know, it goes back to being who's been a good steward for the team. And again, look around baseball. The places that some of this a little bit. You heard, say in Boston, and granted, Fenway's a whole different deal now. Everything else, but you had ownership there, and I don't want to wave the flag too much for those guys because I disagree with some of the things they've done. But you look at how they took what was seen as an aging ballpark in Fenway Park, and they made it a destination, or made sure it remained a destination for the foreseeable future. And I think if you look at the top teams, Wrigley, with the Cubs is another example. It starts with not just bringing in great players and spending money, but it's somehow this intangible of being a good steward for the city or the fan base.
I would call it the Disney effect, right? That there is a love mark for their brand. Their brand is respected and loved because it's respected and respected because it's loved. And no one respects the Orioles, even if you love the Orioles. You should not respect the Orioles at this point.
And that's tragic, because I think deep down in a lot of fans, this will always be, in a sense, their team. But, I don't think fans can necessarily articulate what you just said with the Disney effect, and I totally agree with it. But I think deep down in their heart, they know it. And so therefore, I will maybe stick with a team that's going to be...
Because the beer's cold and the deck is open and it's 82 degrees and it's what I do in the summer.
And they're my guys. They're my guys, so to speak, even though I may not know half their names. But that's where I kind of go back. That thread, that disconnect is becoming, the thread's becoming much more frayed. And so, gosh, what happens if the Orioles lose like 100 games for the next, 3 seasons?
This is a real good time to be talking about where are the Orioles in 2029 in my mind, because 2009 wasn't that long ago. You know what I mean? Like, these years start to run together. They say the days are long and the years are short. And that's a quote for John Harbaugh from his Fellowship of Christian Athletes speech last week. But Tim Wendel is here. Tim_Wendel, award-winning author of Cancer Crossings, Castro's Curveball, Summer 68, writer-in-residence at Johns Hopkins, leukemia warrior, and you can find him out on LinkedIn and Twitter as well. All right, can I stop choking you now on the baseball thing? Are we good now? Can we just talk happy, joy, and how nice it is that I do have some Padres stuff in my closet?
It's always good to have some Padres stuff stashed in your closet.
Hey, man, good having you on as always. We will continue to talk about the grand old game, as they say, and we'll get some baseball in here. You know what I'm going to start doing? Every time I bring you on, I want to do memories with Tim, because we can talk about the good old days, and we can geese together, and get off my lawn, and we can look up stats and be real nerdy and stuff. It'll be fun.
Oh, that sounds great.
We'll start with the Twins. All right, how about that?
Oh, the Twins. Yes, let's start there.
See you soon, man. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks, Nestor.
Tim Wendel's written books about all sorts of baseball things and now does leukemia and important things for the LLS, Leukemia Lymphoma Society. Tim_Wendel, that's Wendel. One of my favorite dudes. Loved reading his writings. And, it's a bummer when we lose great baseball writers to things like, science and saving lives. But we'll suffer the loss and talk to Tim a couple times a year about ball. Nasty at WNST.net finds me. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram. Streaming live on our Facebook as well as our YouTube, WNSTV channel. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST, Towson, Baltimore. And we never stop talking Baltimore sports.